शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये दक्षिणामूर्तिसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुर्साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गणपति बप्पा जय श्री राम। I hope I'm audible and visible both, right? Okay, great. Great. So, actually it's a very onerous task to narrate Ramayana, and the reason why it is an onerous task is because somewhere or the other all of us have heard Ramayana as a story. We've read Ramayana in comics, read Ramayana maybe in books. We've been told the broad storyline. So most of us would really know Ramayana as a story, and to then listen to it every week 1 hour is an onerous task on me to make it interesting for you all. So it's fairly a difficult task that is on hand, because it's a popular story in India, both Ramayana and Mahabharata. More or less we all know what the story is. So I try my level best within my amateur capabilities to try and make it as interesting as possible and try and introduce something new out of this. So last time, if you all remember, we had covered in our culture the importance of namaskara. So, you know, the different types of namaskar that we do, and the fact that we end up seeing God. So as a culture, as a dharma, as a religion is a word that I generally try and avoid. But for the sake of, for a want of a better word, I would end up using it on and off. The better word actually is dharma, set of rules, right? In our dharma, our ancestors understood the purpose of life very early on, okay? They understood that if there is life, the final objective of life is to find and reach to the divine. You call it God, you call it whatever, you call it a divine force, you call it a force which doesn't have form, Nirguna avatar, you call it a Nirakara roop, whatever you call, at the end of the day, the purpose is to reach the divine. That is the basic reason why there is a birth, okay? And that has always been the basic structure on which the entire dharma was established. So constantly, if you see the approach to everything that we do is always an offering to the God. We'll always see divine in everything. We'll always see God in everything. For us, mountains are also gods. For us, rivers are also gods. Not only animate but also inanimate things are gods. Okay, for us, trees are gods. Okay, sun, moon, stars, all of that are gods for us. So we see God in everything, and the purpose of life is to reach the divine, and that's the way the whole structure has been put in place. So even our actions we offer to God. So our prayers are structured such that, you know, as soon as you get up in the morning, you take bath, you go and do namaskar to the God, and you say, okay, let the day be good, let all my actions be offered to you. You start that day like that, and you end the day with also namaskar to the God, saying that thanks for the great day that you've given to me, everything anyway was yours. So there's a very good, and I keep off repeating this particular sentence. There's a beautiful arti called Jai Jagadisha Hare, which is recited in the north of India, in most of the temples, in most of the pujas. This gets recited the last arti. There's a very beautiful verse in that, and it says, Tan man dhana sab tera, sab kuch hai tera, tera tujhko arpan kya lage mera. So that's the approach. My body, my wealth, everything is yours. There is nothing of mine, and I am offering you what is already yours. And that's the approach that we've always had. Everything being, it is also equally true to the food that we have. Okay? Food also is something that we offer first to God, which is called as a Naivedya. And there is a method in which it needs to be offered. So first, when food gets cooked, there is a method in which food gets cooked. So we have rules for everything. Our religion will come out with rules simply for everything. The way you have to sleep, there is a rule. You are supposed to look at your left side and sleep when you sleep. And then when you get up, you are supposed to look from your right side and get up. So there is a scientific reason also for that, because you don't put pressure on your heart. So we have rules for everything. Okay, how do you take bath? There are rules of how you take bath. I will not get into the details, but there are actually rules for how you take bath as well. And then of course, how do you cook? You are supposed to cook with a very pure mind. You are supposed to take your bath and then get into the kitchen. When you start your cooking, you are supposed to offer first to the God, saying that I am starting my day with cooking the right thing. This food is going to enter the bodies of the people whom I love the most. So please let it be healthy. That's the prayer that you do and start your cooking. And that food gets first offered to God as a nevedya. Once God partakes it, that food then becomes a prasad. So anything that gets offered as a nevedya becomes a prasad. And so what we end up having is not just food. It is a food which has been consecrated by God Himself, by His touch. So that food becomes prasad and then it becomes healthy for us. So if you go and have food, you have samosa or something from outside or a pani puri which doesn't get offered to God, and that is the reason they are not healthy. One of the reasons why you find obesity as a problem, one of the reasons why you find so many gastric issues, so because it has not been cooked in the right manner, because it has not been offered to God in the right manner. So even if you are outside, very simple things to do. Even if you are outside when you are at a friend's place, you can't offer food to God. You are eating outside in a restaurant, you can't offer food to the God. All you can do is just before having the first food, offer that food to God, saying that I am having this is my first offering to you. You have first and then I'll have. It's only offering. It's subtle, right? Not God is not going to come and really take a portion of your pizza or your food, right? So there's a very good example, there's a very good analogy that people give. You know, when we do nevedya, does God really have that food? How do you know God has had that food? So for example, when we read books, you know, when we read book, we read page by page. When we read the page, what happens to those words? The words remain on the book, but the knowledge gets transferred to us. We've read that. Now that it's become a part of me, right? So in a subtle form, the knowledge has got transferred to me, but the words still remain there. The word doesn't go, they don't vanish. The moment I read, doesn't make the page blank. Food is also same. When you offer it to God, God has taken it, partaken it in a subtle form, He has blessed it. He doesn't come and actually take a portion of it. He does it subtly so that it gets consecrated, and then that particular food then becomes prasad for us, and then we have it. In our culture, even before we have food, and this I guess it's there even in different cultures, right? You first pray to the God. So we have a small shlok that we actually say. Harir Data, Harir Bhokta, Harir Annam Prajapatihi, Harir Vipra Sharirastu, Bhunte Bhojayate Harihi. What does it mean? It means that Hari as in Vishnu, is the giver. He is the taker also. Harir Data, Harir Bhokta. Harir is the person who is giving, Hari is the person who is also taking. In me, it is the Hari who is taking. Harir Annam Prajapati, that food that I am taking also is Hari. Okay, it's not just the giver and the taker, even that food is Hari. Harir Vipra Sharirastu, which means let the body get illuminated. Vipra is getting illuminated with brightness and wisdom. As soon as I partake this food, let it go and become a part of this healthy system, let it illuminate my body. Bhunte Bhojayate Harihi, which means the person who is eating and the person who is cooked are also Hari. So everything is Hari, and that particular food, when we have, it becomes a prasad, then it becomes healthy for us. In Marathi culture, I can see a few Marathi families here. Samartha Ramdas has written a shlok for before you take food. I don't know, many of you all might have done when you all were children. Many of your grandparents might have taught you all. Vadani kavale gheta nama gyad Sri Hariche, sahaja havana hote nama gheta pukache, जीवन करी जीवित्व अन्न हे पूर्ण ब्रह्म उदभरण नो हे जाणीजे यज्ञ कर्म. What it basically means is, Vadana Kavala means the first mouthful. Kavala means mouthful. Before I have the mouthful, the first mouthful, I am offering to you, Harihi. This is not for just filling my stomach. This activity is not to fill a stomach. It is a yajna itself. And why do we call it yajna? Yajna is basically an offering to the fire. Why do you call it as a yajna? It's it's a sacred work that we are doing. Why do you call it that? Because as per our belief, Vishnu sits in our stomach as Jata Agni. Okay, so the acidity that we have in our stomach when you are hungry, the hunger is actually in the form of a small fire. That's a belief. That's the acidity that's going to consume your food, that's going to digest your food. That is called as a Jata Agni. Okay, so the first food when you eat, apparently the way you are supposed to eat the first 5 morsels, you are supposed to take a small morsel, open your mouth, and then without touching the teeth, you are supposed to gulp it. Okay? Once you gulp that, those 5 morsels become the food for the Jatagni. That is the offering to the God sitting in you, in your stomach. Okay? So we have God outside, Naivedya you do for the God outside, then you have a sloka to tell to the God, and then you also have God sitting inside to whom you are actually feeding. So it is a yagna, there is a fire that you have to satisfy, to satiate, and that God needs to be also fed. And that is how you partake food. When you partake food with this devotion, when you partake food with such amount of bhakti, that food automatically becomes healthy. That food automatically provides well-being to each of us. That's the reason those days people were healthy, people had good health. One of the reasons why we don't enjoy that kind of good health. So I wanted to cover this aspect of partaking food. We have rules for everything. I just want to cover this rule of how do we have food. Okay, there are rules of how to also serve food. First, having served food to God, then you're supposed to serve food. This is something that I covered in my other session also. Then you're supposed to serve food to the crow. Why crow? Because the crow is representative. Our religion, our dharma is fairly symbolic in nature. Okay, you'll always find a lot of symbolism. Something represents something else. That is always there in our culture. Crow represents our forefathers who have expired and gone to the Pitrulok. So then you offer the food to them. Then you offer the food to your guests. Then you offer the food to your servants who are living. And then you partake the food. So that is the order in which you need to have your food. I thought I'll just cover this as a part of our culture. Coming now to our main story, which is Ramayana. We had covered the birth of Rama, Bharata, Lakshmana, Shatrughna, and we had also covered very briefly, because there is not much discussed about their Bala Leela, that is their childhood, right? We had also covered about Ratnakar, who then became Valmiki, and how he got a Divya Darshan, that is a divine vision to actually see Ramayana, live telecast of Ramayana as it is happening. We also saw that there are different versions of Ramayana and how to pick and choose Ramayana. We are supposed to take Ramayanas which are written by our saints and not otherwise, because those are the Ramayana which God himself has decided to show them and hence have the authenticity. We also saw about Vishwamitra and the kind of sage that he was, a Brahma Rishi, but the background is that he was basically a king who then became a Brahma Rishi. So we saw that as his story. And now Vishwamitra has come. Now Vishwamitra was jealous because Vashishta got to see the childhood of Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, Shatrughna. Vishwamitra also wanted to contribute something for the avatar, and they amongst themselves decided that this is the segregation of our duties. So Vishwamitra now comes and with the objective of taking Rama and Lakshmana along with him to the forest. And we had seen that Dasharatha was hesitant of sending the 2 kids because they were not even 16. They are just 12 years. Rama is just 12 years. So he said, Rama is just 12 years, of what use he is going to be? I will come myself and help you with your objective. But then Vishwamitra says, no, I want Rama and Lakshmana only, and only those 2. I don't want any army also. So Vasishta also then consoles Dasharatha, saying there is a purpose for which Vishwamitra has come. Let that purpose happen. You allow them to go. Only good will happen out of this. And now Rama and Lakshmana have begun their journey with Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra is now going to his ashram. Those days there were no cars, vehicles, trains or aeroplanes. Of course there were chariots, but Vishwamitra was a rishi. So it was a Padayatra. Padayatra is walking, right? So they start walking and they go and stay at a place for the first night. On the first morning they get up, and Vishwamitra then initiates them into a very important mantra called Bala Ati Bala. The name of the mantra is Bala Ati Bala mantra. This mantra is a very important mantra and it was taught to Rama and Lakshmana because this mantra apparently gives you stamina. It gives you immense strength to fight. So what happens in a battleground is that you will keep draining energy as you are wielding sword, bow and arrow or the mace. What will effectively happen is you are eating up into your energy and you don't get breaks. Wars used to happen for the full day, right? So you need to have enough stamina to actually wield those weapons, and those weapons are also heavy. Now, Bala Ati Bala as a mantra gives them power to carry on for days together. And that is the kind of power and stamina that particular mantra gives. So Vishwamitra trains them into that, and he knew because Rama and Lakshmana's avatar objective is to finally fight Ravana, and they would need all the amount of strength because Ravana, however evil he was, it is true that he was also extremely powerful, extremely knowledgeable, right? So you had to have, he was an enemy worth being an enemy. So for fighting such an enemy, worthy enemy, you also need to have the amount of strength. So that was the first mantra that Vishwamitra teaches them. Vishwamitra also does something very interesting, and this is something that all our elders have to do, okay? And that is, he told a lot of stories. He told a lot of stories about the Puranas, about gods, yes, but also about the ancestors of Rama himself. Our parents also should be doing this. They have done it, and we as children now, when we become parents, should also end up doing it to the next generation. The first set of stories that our elders should always do is tell about our own selves, how we live, how have we lived as kids, what is the kind of life that we had, how did we study, how our parents lived, how our grandparents lived. The lineage of the family has to be made known, and it is important because we belong to that family. We need to know the history of the family. Even before we know the history of the nation, we need to know the history of our own family. Like the first, who's best to tell us about the history of our family? It's our own parents and grandparents, and that is the reason why you need grandparents in house, because grandparents generally will not have any other work to do because they are through with their own lives, right? They are now in the fag end of their lives. They are not actively looking after family. Then the best people to tell us stories are our grandparents, right? So Vishwamitra does that role. He tells them lot of stories. In today's session, we will cover a few of those stories which are the important ones. But before he starts off with the story, they first enter a forest called Dandaka. Okay, it is called as Dandakaranya. Aranya means forest. Dandaka is the name and Aranya means forest. So Dandakaranya, they enter the Dandakaranya. There is a demoness, okay, a female demon who's living, called Tataka. No, Vishwamitra just doesn't tell you how to fight and kill her. Vishwamitra tells the story of Tataka first. He tells who Tataka is. Who's Tataka? Tataka was born to a Yaksha. So who's a Yaksha? So just as there are lives on earth, we have spoken very briefly on 7 upper worlds and 7 underworlds. There are lives there also in the upper worlds and in the underworlds. Okay? So you got Yaksha, Gandharva, Devas, Asuras, okay? Kinnaras, Nagas. So these are all different types of lives, different forms of lives in the upper and the lower world. The Nagas and the Asuras generally are in the underworld. The Yaksha, Kinnara, Gandharva, Devas are all in the upper worlds. So there are different lives, different forms. So Tataka was born to a Yaksha, okay, and she was called Suketu. Suketu was the name of the Yaksha. Okay, now I'm going to throw a lot of names. Ramana is going to come with a lot of names. You all want to note down? You all can note down. Because only when you get the names right, you will be able to appreciate the story. Suketu was a Yaksha, okay. Now what happens is, he asks Brahma that my child should be blessed with immense power. So Brahma blesses that girl with immense power. So Tataka is growing up like a beautiful girl, but also with lot of power, physical brute power. She is growing up very well. She ends up marrying an Asura. You can call it an intercaste marriage. Okay, those days also it happened. So Yaksha's daughter marrying an Asura. That name of the Asura was Sunda. Okay, this Sunda ends up defiling a yagna of Agastya. Agastya, if you remember, was one of the Sapta Rishis. The Sapta Brahma Rishis, if you remember, I had given you the names of the Sapta Brahma Rishis last time. that is Atri, Vasishtha, Agastya, Vishwamitra, Gautama, Jamadagni, Bharadwaja. These are the 7 Brahma Rishis, and Agastya is one of the important Brahma Rishis. So he ends up defiling one of the yagnas of Agastya, and by curse, Sunda dies. Now Tataka, being a powerful lady, she becomes very angry. She and her 2 sons, she's got 2 sons, okay? The names of 2 sons is Maricha and Subahu. In the last 3 minutes, I've already introduced 6-7 names, okay? So I'll probably try and repeat it. Tataka was born to Suketu, who got married to Sunda and got 2 children, Maricha and Subahu. You may want to forget all the names, but keep Maricha in your mind, because Maricha has a role to play later on, few weeks down the line when we come to an appropriate place. Maricha will have an important role to play in Ramayana. So Maricha and Subahu are their children. So once Sunda dies, Tataka with rage, with the rage of revenge, comes and attacks Agastya. Agastya, what he does is he again curses them. He again curses them and says, Tataka will become an ugly demoness. Okay? Tataka is so ugly that apparently she has an eye even in her stomach. Okay? And a mouth below that. Okay? And a dark lady with multiple hands and ugly looking demoness. And she then goes and stays in this Dandakaranya. She then infests Dandakaranya. So whoever passes through that Dandakaranya, she kills and she becomes a man-eating demoness. And Subahu and Maricha are also living with her. So there are the people who travel from one place to the other place. They will generally choose only a particular point of time when she would be asleep, which is generally demons are asleep in the morning. They are called Nishachar. All demons, all asura are called Nishachar because they are awake. They remain awake in the night. Nishachara. Nisha means night, and Chara means somebody who moves in night. Okay. And they do that because their strength also is double in the night. And that is the reason they move around in the night. So, she being now a demoness, she is generally she's awake only in the night. In the morning time, she is generally asleep. So, people used to only move around at that time in that forest. People were petrified by her existence. And Vishwamitra gets Rama and Lakshmana so that they can kill her. So, having told the entire story, Rama being Rama, Maryada Purushottam, right? He will never ever raise a weapon on a lady, right? That's not dharma at all. Raising weapon on a lady is not dharma at all. So he asks, you are asking me to kill a lady, how is that possible? I mean, is it not against dharma? This is where dharma sukshma, the subtle part of dharma comes in. Vishwamitra explains. He says, no, dharma, yes, normal ladies are not to be killed. You are not supposed to raise your weapon on them. But if there is an oppressing lady, if there is a tyrant, if the lady is doing the wrong things, then it is a duty of the king to ensure that he brings peace to the location. He is supposed to fight them and if required, also kill. So it is a part of the Raja Dharma. It's a part of the rule for a king. Rama Lakshmana are not kings yet, but they are representing the king, right? They are representing Dasharatha as the king. They are there as the representative for a kingdom. So it is your duty to fight and kill. So Rama then gets into his position and he twangs his bow. The twang of the bow is so strong that Tataka is now awakened from her slumber. And she says, who's this? Who's disturbed my sleep? And she finds 2 young, handsome looking men standing in front of her wielding a bow. She understands that they are there to fight. And then there is a huge fight that happens. Rama and Lakshmana, being gentlemen by nature, they first try and actually just try and delimb her. Basically try and cut the limbs so that she is less lethal and let her live by like that. But then Vishwamitra says, no, don't do that. She is going to be very powerful even without limbs. She fights vigorously, and then Rama and Lakshmana realize that this is not the way it's going to happen. They will have to make a lethal blow and kill her. So Rama finally sends a very powerful Astra. Astra is a divine weapon. He sends it and kills Tataka. Suddenly the entire forest is brightened by sunlight. Because Tataka was living there, the entire forest, it seems, was engulfed in darkness. The entire forest now suddenly brightens up and the sunlight reaches all parts of the forest. They kill her They do the Antim Kriya for her and then they start walking with Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra takes them to their location, the location where he was doing his yagna, where people are disturbing. He takes them to their location and now he starts his yagna. The moment he starts his yagna, all his rishis, all his assistants, they all have made the preparations and they have now started the yagna. You have to remember that rishis did yagna not for themselves, they did yagna for the benefit of mankind. So even today, saints, whatever they do, they always do for the benefit of mankind. They don't do anything for themselves. So all this yagna was also done for the larger benefit of mankind. So they start doing the yagna. Tataka's death, the news of Tataka's death reaches Subahu and Maricha, who have gone somewhere out. They see their mother is dead. They realize that these are the two young guys who have come and killed her. So they now, with an intent of not only defiling the yagna, but also want to take revenge of her death, they come with their entire army and start attacking the yagna. They all come with all impure things. They come with blood, they come with caracas, they come with bones, so that they can throw it on the yagna and unpurify the entire place. They start throwing it. Rama and Lakshmana, with their prowess of wielding the bow and arrow, they put up an umbrella kind of a thing and they protect the entire yagna. As they are fighting, they start also, Rama and Lakshmana start killing each of the army. They have not yet started coming to Subahu and Maricha. They have killed all the army. Now they find themselves alone. Maricha and Subahu find themselves alone. With all their force now they attack. What Lakshmana does it, he gives sends a powerful astra and kills Subahu. And Rama sends a separate astra which completely ties Maricha and throws him thousands of kilometers away into the sea. Now this incident again is important. This incident is important because this will come later on, a few weeks later. I told Maricha lives, okay, to tell this tale later on. So Maricha doesn't get killed. Maricha gets tied and is thrown thousands of kilometers. By a single shot of an arrow gets thrown thousands of kilometers away into the sea. And thus they save the yagna. The yagna gets done days. These are not 1 day, 2 days yagna. They go on for days. So yagna happens for quite a few amount of days and there is a completion that happens. And the reason why they started, that objective also is fulfilled. Vishwamitra is very happy. He says, I've been trying to do this yagna for a long time and I have not been able to complete it because of these two brothers. They are menacing in nature. Finally, I've been able to complete it because of you two. I have to do something for you, is what he thinks in his mind. And he says, what best for young boys who are eligible bachelors, what better to do than to suggest a good bride for both of them. That is what he thinks in his mind. He is not yet told to Rama and Lakshmana. Here again you have to remember, Rama and Lakshmana probably are just 12 years old. 12 years was considered as a marriable age in that particular age and time. So again the Kaladesh Niyam will be applying for that particular reason. So then now they start off. So Vishwamitra has made up his mind as to who is going to be his wife. Now he's already made up his mind that it has to be Sita from the Mithila Nagari, which is the city called Mithila. So he says, let us now walk towards Mithila. Rama and Lakshmana still don't know as to why they are going towards Mithila. Vishwamitra is taking them, so they are also tagging along. As they go along, now Vishwamitra starts a lot of stories. Okay? The first story is about Subramanya Swami. They come and cross across the forest where Subramanya Swami is Kartikeya Swami, is the second son for Shiva and Parvati. He tells the entire Skanda Purana, he tells the entire Purana of Shiva, how Subramanya was born, how he lived, how he fought wars, how he killed demons, how he became the god of knowledge, the god of wisdom. Even today, Kartikeya Swami is known as the god of wisdom. So all saints are apparently considered as avatar of Kartikeya Swami himself. He is supposedly wiser than Shiva himself. He gives Upadesh, that is the mantra Upadesh to his own father. Shiva himself takes Upadesh from Kartikeya Swami. He is that much wise. So he tells all that story. Then he comes to the story of Ganga. So I will cover Ganga's story in a little bit in a detail. The reason I would want to cover Ganga's story in a little detail is because this land is called as land of Ganga, right? It is called as Punya Bhumi because Ganga flows on this land. Northerners, North India, actually they don't call only Ganga at all. They always call it as Ganga Maiya. Ganga is equivalent to mother herself. Okay? So Ganga is that pure. We, having lived in this part of this world, at least once we all have to visit any of the places where Ganga flows and take a dip, because she has the power to wash away all our sins and all the dirt that we have in our lives. Not just body dirt, dirt inside. That's a belief, right? So Vishwamitra now comes and tells the story of Ganga as to how Ganga actually came on earth. And this is a very interesting story. Now this story is also important because Vishwamitra, because the reason why Ganga came also involves the ancestors of Rama. It is because of ancestors of Rama and their penance that they did that why we have Ganga on earth today. So where does it start? It starts from an ancestor of Rama called Sagara. Okay, Sagara is an emperor. Chakravarti is the reign for an emperor. Chakravarti means emperor. So Sagara Chakravarti had 2 wives. Okay, and a sage blesses them that they will have children. One of the wives, he said, will have 1 child and the other will have 60,000 children. Okay. Now these are the things you will have to imagine. 60,000 children is beyond our imagination. But you have to just imagine that they had 60,000 children. But the sage also blesses. He says, your lineage will get continued by that 1 son and not because of the 60,000 sons. So they come back home, they have children. One of the wives has got 1 son and the name of the son is Asamanjas. Okay, that is the name of the son. And the other wife has got 60,000 powerful, good, powerful children. Now this Asamanjas turns out to be a lunatic, okay, and he's a cruel lunatic. So he gets very pleasure in all horrible things. He used to apparently even kill children. He used to throw them into the lake and see them drown and get happiness out of that. So people are very fed up with that kind of a person, you know. Sagara Chakravarti, Sagara king is a person who's such a great king, and he unfortunately has a king who has a son who's so cruel, who's a lunatic by nature, right? So they are very upset about him. But these 60,000 children are very good and they are doing very well. Now this Asamanjas also gets married and he gets a son called Anshuman. Now that Anshuman is a very nice nice son. He is a very person who is living by dharma. He is doing all right things. So Sagara Chakravarti, Sagara Raja is very attached to Anshuman because he knows the lineage is going to go ahead because of him. He is very attached to him. He teaches him all the warfare. He teaches him how to administrate a kingdom, and generally is very fond of Anshuman. So what Sagara Chakravarti does is, which those days all emperors used to do, they did a Rajasuya Yagna, okay, or what is also called as an Ashwamedha Yagna. Now what an Ashwamedha Yagna happens is, for annexing different lands, they will not wage a war. They will not wage a war without purpose. They will first just send a white horse, okay, and there will be an army which succeeds them. So there is a horse that will walk, and there is an army which is following them. Wherever the horse walks, that land will be annexed by that king. If there is a kingdom who doesn't want to give his land to that particular king or doesn't want to become a part of that other king, the larger emperor, he will go and rein the horse and he'll say, I would want to fight. And then there will be a battle. So unless and until the other person is willing to fight, there will be no unnecessary war that will be waged. So he performs an Ashwamedha Yagna and Anshuman goes with the horse. And they are going to different places. At one particular place, they take a rest at the night. Lord Indra, who is the king of Devas, okay, so Lord Indra has a little, he comes with a little doubtful character, okay, he generally has a little bit of jealousy. He is a person who generally is jealous about people becoming more powerful than him. So these are the typical characteristics. He is a great king, he is a great god, but he also has these problems. So the moment he sees that Sagara Chakravarti is doing this particular penance, and he's becoming very popular and he's becoming very powerful and he's annexing a lot of land, he decides to do a mischief. What he does is, when these people are asleep, he steals the horse, takes it and keeps it at a place where a sage called Kapila Muni is doing penance. Now Kapila Muni is a very great sage. He is doing penance, he is already in a samadhi state. He doesn't even know that there is a horse standing there. He is completely into his penance. Now these guys get up in the morning and they find the horse is not there. They searched the entire place and they couldn't find the horse at all. So Ashwamedha Yagna is now stopped, right? It's not going ahead. Anshuman comes back and he complains to his father that the horse is missing and I couldn't go ahead with my campaign. So he said, no, we'll have to find the horse, otherwise we cannot carry on with the penance. So he sends his 60,000 sons to search the corners of the earth to find where that horse is. They go and reach the place where the hermitage of Kapila Muni, and then they find that the horse is standing there. Now what these 60,000 people think is, this sage has actually stolen the horse, and they start hurling him with abuses. This disturbs the sage. So what happens, you have to understand, okay, when sages are doing tapas, which is called as a penance, the word tapas is a formation of two words, okay, that basically comes from tap. Tap means heat, okay. So when you do tapas, when you do penance, there is a lot of heat that gets generated internally. So what happens is, when you break a particular penance and the rishi opens his eyes, you have to be careful, because that if he opens it with anger, then what will effectively happen is he will end up burning everybody in front of him, because there is a lot of heat that is generated out of that penance. Because these people have kind of started hurling abuses at him, he just opens his eyes out of anger, being disturbed from his penance, not because of anything. When he just opens his eyes, instantly all the 60,000 people become ashes. They just get burnt to ashes. And without bothering what has happened, Kapila Muni again continues with this penance. The horse is still standing there. 60,000 sons have now turned into ashes, and they are not returning back. This information is given to Sagara Chakravarti, that they found the horse, but Kapila Muni actually turned them into ashes because of the anger. Now Sagara Chakravarti knows that you are not supposed to enrage a rishi. So Anshuman goes, does namaskar to rishi and says, I'm sorry my brothers disturbed you, but you need to tell me, how do I revive them? So he said, there is no way of reviving them. The only thing that you can probably do is, when a body gets burnt by ashes, you are supposed to do an asti visarjan. You are supposed to go and put it into a flowing water. Okay? You can probably take these ashes and put it into a flowing water. That will ensure that they get mukti. Now 60,000, you can just imagine the heap of ash that is lying there, right? 60,000 people have died in a split second. You can just imagine the heap of ash that is lying there. So he said, where can I carry this much amount of ash and put it into any flowing water? What else can I do? So he said, the only other thing you can do is get Ganga from heaven and ask her to flow through them. So then their sins are also washed, and then they will also get mukti. So he said, where do I find Ganga? So they said, Ganga is only in the heaven. So where is Ganga? Ganga is the water that is flowing out of Brahma's Kamandalu. So when Vishnu takes an Vaman avatar, right, and he takes a Vishwarup, that is called as a Trivikrama avatar, which means a man with 3 foot. When he takes that avatar, Trivikrama avatar, one of the foot he places on the heaven. Brahma washes that feet with the water. That water that flows out and falls into Vishnu's foot is what Ganga is. Okay? And Ganga is flowing only in the heaven, and she is not ready to come to the earth at all. Coming to earth is considered to be, it's not considered to be great, you know, they are living in much happiness. Coming to Bhulok is not something that is enjoyed by people living up. So it's like coming to ground floor, you know, people living in the 16th, 17th floor, they enjoy that, right? So Ganga is not ready to come. So then Anshuman asks, then what do I do? So the only way to do is you have to go and request. If she comes, great, otherwise do a penance, otherwise there is no other way. So Anshuman goes back to his father and he says, this is what has happened, and unfortunately everybody has died, and the only way we can give them mukti is if Ganga comes. Sagara Chakravarti listens to this and out of being grief-stricken itself, he dies. Anshuman also tries his best to persuade Ganga to come, nothing happens. After Anshuman, there is Dilipa who comes. Dilipa comes and also tries to, his son, he also comes and tries to persuade Ganga to come, she doesn't come. Dilipa's son, named Bhagirath. I'm sorry if I'm very fast, but these are small stories in the part of Ramayana, and there are too many names that come up, okay? You don't have to remember all these names. It is okay if you remember even Bhagirath, because Bhagirath is the person who actually got Ganga down. Bhagirath takes upon him saying that no, my ancestors have to get mukti, their sins have to be washed. I will do penance even if it means for thousands of years and get Brahma's blessings and get Ganga down. So he starts off a penance for thousands of years. He ensures that Brahma comes and gives him darshan. Brahma tells, yes, I will ask Ganga to come and flow down. But there is a problem. He says, what is the problem? Because Ganga, when she starts flowing from heaven, she will flow with such a great force that she can wash away the entire earth. So you have to ensure that she doesn't do that. And the only person who can help you in doing that is Shiva himself. So he again does a penance for Shiva. He's saying, Shiva, no, you have to help. So Shiva, after thousands of years, comes and blesses him. He says, okay, I will help you. So he says, ask Ganga to come. Now Ganga is in her own ego. She's saying, I will now ensure I am flowing heaven happily and these guys want me to come to the earth. Who are these guys, going to decide about me? I will flow with such a force that I will not only wash the earth, I will also wash away Shiva himself. So she falls on the head of Shiva. And Shiva, I don't know if you have ever seen, he's a jatadhari, which means he's got long tresses of hair. Right? They are locked hairs. He just watches Ganga flow down with force and he just ties his hair in such a manner that Ganga is completely locked and Ganga is not able to flow out of him at all. So that doesn't serve Bhagirath's purpose because Ganga is not flowing out of Shiva also. Shiva also, out of anger to subdue Ganga's ego, he ties her into hair and locks her permanently. She is not even flowing. Now again Bhagirath does another thousands of years of penance to Shiva, saying that please at least let a trickle from your head flow down. Shiva blesses her, blesses Bhagirath, and then allows a trickle. So if you have seen Shiva's photo, there is a half moon that is there on his forehead, and then there is a small trickle that will flow from his head. Now that is Ganga flowing from his head. So Ganga is why she is pure, why she is so pious, why she is such an important river. She has connection to all the three important gods. Brahma's Kamandalus, water, falling on Vishnu's feet, falling on Shiva's head, and then coming to earth. And hence it is such an important river. Now she flows in a very small stream and then starts following Bhagirath. The problem to Bhagirath doesn't end here. As she is flowing, she is in her full mischief. She is flowing, she is swaying everything that is coming in her way. Villages are getting washed away, things are getting washed away. What is happening is there is a rishi who is doing a penance there called Janhu Rishi. Okay, another name, I'm sorry, I'm going to throw a lot of names. So Janhu Rishi is doing yajna there and she washes the yajna also. But Janhu Rishi gets very angry and he completely drinks Ganga into his stomach. He drinks Ganga. Now Ganga is nowhere, not flowing anywhere again. So Bhagirath again comes and pleads, saying that Rishi, that I have caught Ganga after a lot of penance, please don't do this to me. I have called her for a particular reason, you need to really help me out. So Janhu then allows Ganga to flow from his ears, and that is why Ganga is also called as Janhavi, daughter of Janhu. Because she flows from the body of Janhu, she becomes Janhu's daughter, and that is why the other name for Ganga is also Janhavi. And then she flows in her grace and then goes and washes the sins of all those 60,000 people and then goes and meets the ocean. Even today, there is a place where Ganga originates. Okay, it is called as Gangotri. Gomukh Gangotri. It is in a shape of a cow's mouth. Okay. Lot of researchers have gone there, they have gone and checked as to what is the source of water. It doesn't tickle, there's a gush of water that comes from that cave. Nobody knows where that water is coming from. And this is a fact. Huh? Geologists have actually gone and seen as to where is the source of water. Nobody knows what is the source of water. But there is a huge gush of water that comes from there, and that is what flows as Ganga. Ganga is the purest of all rivers. Even in its dirt that we see today, it is purest of rivers. Ganga, before she comes on earth, she asks, I know I am going to wash off a lot of sins of people. What will effectively happen is I will become dirty. So who will come and purify me? I also need periodical purification, right? If I am going to wash off people's sins, I also will become dirty. Who will wash off my sins? So Shiva promises that time to time there will be a lot of saints who will be born in this land. Those saints will come and take bath in your waters, and they will cleanse you. The saints take away those sins. So we take bath in Ganga, we wash our sins, we make Ganga dirty, the saints will come and take bath and they will purify Ganga. And that's the pact that is there between Shiva, Ganga, us and the saints. Okay? So this is the story of Ganga. Why it is important? Because this Bhumi is sanctified by the presence of Ganga, and a lot of rivers have an origin to Ganga. So even Godavari is called as Dakshina Ganga, Kaveri is called as Dakshina Ganga, and all these rivers they come from the same source, and they have blessed this land and made it fertile. Water is an important source of energy. Water is an important source of life, right? It sustains life, and that is why Ganga is so important for our culture. So this is the story of actually anybody who puts in a lot of efforts in life, puts in a lot of efforts and does a lot of, takes in a lot of pains to achieve something, they do call him as Bhagirath Prayas. He did a Bhagirath Penance, he did a Bhagirath Prayas to do what he did, because Bhagirath did that Prayas, that penance to get Ganga. Prayas means attempt to get Ganga down. So anybody who takes too much of pain to even achieve the smallest of the thing is said to have done a Bhagirath Prayas. Now they come, once they have crossed this part. The other name, thanks to my mother, the other name for Ganga is also Bhagirathi, because Bhagirath got her, she is called as Bhagirathi. They cross Ganga, then they get into a place called Siddhashrama. Okay, Siddhashrama is where Vaman Avatar got played. I will not get into details for paucity of time. We've got about just 8-10 minutes. He explains the importance of Vaman Avatar, and then goes to a hermitage, a place where they see a particular rock. It looks like a human figure, but there is just a rock. And Vishwamitra says, Rama, that you have to touch your feet on that particular rock. So Rama, being Rama, he doesn't touch feet. Even before he touches feet on the ground, he says a shloka and then touches it. So he just lifts his leg. In the process of lifting his leg, because of the wind, the dust attached to his leg gets washed onto the rock, and there's a woman who comes out of that rock. That woman is named as Ahalya. Okay, there is a whole story behind Ahalya. She was cursed by her own husband, and she turns into a rock. This is a story I cannot narrate because there are children here. This is a story I will not be able to narrate. But just to remember that Ahalya Papa Mochan, this is an important place where Gautama Rishi, her husband, curses her because of some sin that she does, and she turns into a rock. And when she says, I also need a release from this curse, he says, God Vishnu himself will take an avatar, and when the dust of his feet falls on you, you will get your release from the curse. So Ahalya gets released and gets reunited to her husband, which is Gautama Rishi. I have finished this story in short, but this is a very interesting story. Ahalya's birth, it starts from Ahalya's birth, her marriage, then getting married to Gautama Rishi. But it has a lot of angles which I will not be able to explain with kids around. So hence I have just shortened it for the sake of brevity. Having done all of this, then they enter the boundaries of Mithila Nagar. Mithila Nagar is basically the city. The country is just like the country where Rama lived was Koshala Desh and Ayodhya city. India is a country, Bombay is a city, Videha Desh, that is a country, and Mithila is the city. Right? So Videha Desh they enter, and now Vishwamitra tells the story of Sita as to how Sita was born. Sita is living there, how Sita was born, how she was born to Janaka Maharaj. Now this is an important part. This and then we'll follow with the marriage of Rama and Sita. I will try and cover in my next session. Rama and Sita's marriage is considered to be very, very sacred, and generally one does a Nevedya on the day when that marriage. These are standard pravachan rules. There are certain rules that are there for a certain pravachan. So one of the rules which I have missed telling you all is that when you do a Ramayana pravachan, what I am doing is a pravachan, you generally keep a small place for Hanuman to sit, because Hanuman is promised that wherever wherever there is Ram's name that gets uttered, I will be there, and I will be there with my eyes full of tears listening to his story. So we have, I'll just show you, it's not getting captured in the camera, I'll just show you. If you can see, let me know. So if you can see, there's a small Hanuman sitting on there. That is a place that we've kept for Hanuman to sit and listen to the story. Yatra yatra Raghunatha Kirtanam tatra tatra Kristamasta Anjalim Bashpapari Paripurna Lochanam Marutin Namata Rakshasantakam. Yatra yatra, wherever his name is uttered, Rama's name is uttered, Hanuman sits with his head bowed down with utmost devotion, with his eyes full of tears, listening to the story of Rama every time. Okay, that is what the shloka means. The belief is that Hanuman is sitting with us and is blessing us and hearing our story as I am narrating. So it's not only you all, and also Hanuman who's listening to my story. So I better narrate it properly to you all. So let us finish it here. Next session we will have the most auspicious thing, and that is Rama and Sita's marriage, which is considered to be a very beautiful occasion for all of us. So we'll try and cover that as an occasion. We'll cover Sita's birth and then her marriage and then events after that. So all of this becomes a part of what is called as the Balakand, the first chapter of Ramayana. With the marriage ends the Balakand. When they enter Ayodhya, then starts the Ayodhya Kand. So we've not even finished Balakand, we are in the middle of it. I know I'm going a little slow, but I want you all to also enjoy the process. The idea is not to finish off with the story. The idea is, as I said, a lot of us will also know a good part of the story. The idea is to enjoy the nuances in the story, the smaller parts. The delicacy is to be enjoyed slowly, so that we are able to relish it and enjoy it. So that is the whole idea why I am going a little slow. Just bear with me. I will try and make it as interesting as possible within my limited capabilities. Any question that you all have? Hope I was audible. Yes, you have any questions? Yes, ask me. I can't hear you, Sarah, if you can be a little loud. What? Naivedya. Naivedya is the offering to God that you do. So, Naivedya is basically the first, when you prepare a food, okay, that food needs to get offered to God, okay. That food, when gets offered to God, becomes a prasad. So, so what we do is we cook food. Generally, the way Naivedya is to be offered is whatever is cooked in whatever quantity has to be got and brought in front of God. Okay, and then we take water and then circumambulate it with so as to purify it and then offer it to God. So God partakes it. The belief is that God partakes it in a subtle form and then gives it to us. So then it becomes a prasad. Then we are not having only food. It becomes a prasad.
Prasad chadana chulubaba.
Yeah. Yes. Gautami, I wouldn't know, Yogesh. No. Gautam Rishi cursed Ahalya, his wife. I wouldn't know, I'll have to check. My only quick take on it, Gautami probably might be Ahalya's another name, or there might be another Rishi Patni, which I will have to find out. I'll surely do that. Yeah, so Ganga's name is, so Ganga gets named as Janhavi because she comes out of Janu's ear. I hope I told a story which was, thanks Yogesh, I hope I was clear in my story and I was not very fast, right? Yeah. Right. Right. Great, thanks Yogesh, thanks. हाँ बोला काकी, yeah. Right. So she falls on earth. भूमीवर आल्यानंतर वाहत असताना, as she is flowing in full mischief. She's a young lady. So she is flowing in full mischief. She's swaying everything that is coming in her way, like a river does. A river doesn't care, anything that comes in its way, it's going to get swayed. Janu Rishi is doing a penance, he's doing a yagna. Without realizing that, she washes away that yagna. Because of that, Janu Rishi gets angry and he simply takes into Achaman. Hela Achaman mantat na. He takes it into his palm and like an Achaman, he just drinks away the entire river into his stomach. And then Bhagirath is again. Then he again gets tense here. I got her for a different purpose. So then he releases from his ear. Because she is coming out from his body, she becomes his daughter. And that is why her name, Rishicha Kanatna alagule, she becomes Janhavi. हाँ बोलो right. Oh, correct. Oh, excellent. I didn't know that. I didn't know that Gautam is another name for Godavari. Godavari was, yes, Gautam Rishi's ashram itself was at Tirambakeshwar. It was near where Godavari Udgaman happened. Excellent. Thanks Vijay. Thanks a lot. Any other questions you all have? Otherwise we can carry on with our Hanuman Chalisa. Oh, okay. Excellent. So generally the belief is that you start with praying for blessings of Ganapati and you end with Hanuman. So that is what we generally do. So we start with Ganapati and then end with Hanuman. So can we start? Good, great. Shri Guru Charana Saroj Raja Nijamana Mukura Sudhari Varnau Raghuvar Vimala Jasu Jodaya Kupalachari बुद्धिहीन तनु जानिके सुमिरो पवन कुमार बल बुद्धि विद्या देहु मोहे हरहु क्लेश विकार
जय हनुमान ज्ञान गुण सागर जय कपीश तिहु लोक उजागर रामदूत अतुलित बल धामा अंजनी पुत्र पवन सुत नामा महावीर विक्रम बजरंगी कुमति निवार सुमति के संगी कंचन वरण विराज सुबेसा कानन कुंडल कुंचित केसा हाथ वज्र और ध्वजा विराजे कांधे मूंज जनेऊ साजे शंकर सुवन केसरी नंदन तेज प्रताप महाजगवंदन विद्यावान गुणी अति चातुर राम काज करिबेको आतुर प्रभु चरित्र सुनिबेको रसिया राम लखन सीता मन बसिया सूक्ष्म रूप धरि सियहि दिखावा विकट रूप धरि लंक जरावा रूप धरि असुर संहारे रामचंद्र के काज सवारे लाए सजीवन लखन जियाए श्री रघुवीर हर्षि उर लाए रघुपति कीन्ही बहुत बड़ाई तुम मम प्रिय भरत ही सम भाई सहस बदन तुमरो यश गावे अस कहि श्रीपति कंठ लगावे सनकादिक ब्रह्मादि मुनीसा सारद सहित अहिसा जम कुबेर दिगपाल जहाँ ते कवि कोविद कहि सके कहाँ ते तुम उपकार सुग्रीव कीना राम मिलाए राजपद दीना
तुमरो मंत्र विभीषण माना, लंकेश्वर भय सब जग जाना।
जुग सहस्त्र योजन पर भानु, लील्योता ही मधुर फल जानु। प्रभु मुद्रिका मेलि मुख माहि, जल दिलांग गए अचरज नाही। दुर्गम काज जगत के जेते, सुगम अनुग्रह तुमरे तेते। काम दुआरे तुम रखवारे, होत न आज्ञा बिनु पैसारे। सब सुख लहै तुम्हारी शरणा, तुम रक्षक काहू को डरना। आपन तेज समारो आपै,
तीनों लोक हांकते कापै। भूत पिशाच निकट नहीं आवे, महावीर जब नाम सुनावे।
नासे
रोग हरै सब पीड़ा, जपत निरंतर हनुमत बीरा। संकट ते हनुमान छुड़ावे, मन क्रम वचन ध्यान जो लावे। हम तपस्वी राजा, तिनके काज सकल तुम साजा। और मनोरथ जो कोई लावे, सो ही अमित जीवन फल पावे।
चारों जुग परताप तुम्हारा है,
प्रसिद्ध जगत उजियारा। साधु संत के तुम रखवारे, असुर निकंदन राम दुलारे। अष्ट सिद्धि नव निधि के दाता, असवर दीन जानकी माता। राम रसायन तुम्हारे बासा, सदा रहो रघुपति के दासा।
तुम्हारे भजन
राम को पावे, जन्म जन्म के दुख बिसरावे। अंत काल रघुवरपुर जाई, जहाँ जन्म हरि भक्त कहाई। और देवता चित्त न धरहि, हनुमत से ही सर्व सुख करहि।
संकट कटे मिटे
मिटे सब पीड़ा, जो सुमिरै हनुमत बल बीरा। जय 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 हनुमान गोसाई, कृपा करहु गुरुदेव की नाई। ये शत बार पाठ कर कोई, छूट ही बंदी महासुख होई। जो यह पढ़े हनुमान चालीसा, होए सिद्धि साकी गौरीसा।
तुलसीदास सदा
हरि चेरा कीजे नाथ हृदय महडेरा। पवन तनय संकट हरना,
मंगल मूर्ति रूप।
राम लखन सीता सहित, हृदय बसहु सुर भूप। सियावर रामचंद्र की
जय,
के बोलो हनुमान की
जय।